It's great to hear all the chatter and old friends and new friends meeting each other, and it's wonderful to see you all here today. My name is Betsy Hopkins, and I'm the Associate Director at the Office of Aging and Disability Services through Department of Health and Human Services. And this event has been at least 3 years in the making, and we've had lots of great participation and work on this over the course of the last year and a half in particular. And namely, you will hear from a number of providers and agencies who have done just some really great work over the last couple of years with us in some pilot programs that they've done. So we're really excited to be able to share their work as well as some other work that's happening in other states. So thanks again for joining us here today. I have the distinct honor this morning of introducing someone who has been a steadfast leader in public service and a strong advocate for Maine people throughout her career. Sara Gagne-Holmes was appointed Commissioner of the Maine Department of Health and Human Services in October 2024. As Commissioner, she leads the largest agency in state government, serving about a third of Maine's population, including children, families, older adults, and individuals with disabilities, mental health needs, and substance use challenges. A native of Maine, Commissioner Gagne-Holmes has served in a wide range of leadership roles, from Deputy Commissioner at DHHS to Executive Director of a statewide nonprofit legal aid and advocacy organization. Her career has also included work at the John T. Gorman Foundation, legal counsel in a previous gubernatorial administration, and time as a small business owner here in Maine. She's a graduate of Bowdoin College and the University of Maine School of Law, and she brings deep experience, integrity, and vision to her role. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Sara Gagne-Holmes.
Good morning. It is truly my pleasure to welcome you to Portland for the 2025 Innovation Summit, A Path for Maine. Whether you've traveled across town or across the country, as I understand that 20% of you today are from out of state, we are glad you're here. Your presence reflects a deep shared commitment to improving the lives of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, autism, and brain injury. And it underscores something we all know. Building inclusive, person-centered systems is only possible when we do it together. I'd like to begin by recognizing the team effort that brought us here. Since 2021, the Office of Aging and Disability Services, the National Disability Institute, and Green Tree Event Consultants have collaborated to make this summit possible. Please join me in thanking them for their ongoing dedication to this work. Before we go further, I'd like to share a letter from Governor Janet Mills. To attendees of the 2025 Innovation Summit, I regret not being able to join you in person for this important gathering. Thank you to the Department of Health and Human Services staff for convening this summit of local and national healthcare providers, advocates, and policymakers. Like all of you, I want to make sure that every person in Maine can lead a happy, productive, and fulfilling life. That goal is close to my heart. My eldest grandson, Zach, is a young adult with autism. His parents had to make the transition between childhood services and adult services during the pandemic, which was not easy by any means. I am proud of how we have improved services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities or autism in recent years, but I still think about Zach every time a family in Maine tells me they are having a hard time finding care for their loved ones. The summit is a continuation of an important conversation about how we can deliver better services and an opportunity to experience and explore innovative technologies that are increasing independence for people nationwide. I encourage you to use these 2 days to share your insights and showcase your work so that we can better support people with disabilities, as well as the home and community-based workers that provide their critical care in Maine. Thank you for your presence at this summit and for your persistent efforts to ensure those with disabilities can lead independent, happy, and successful lives in Maine. Sincerely, Governor Janet T. Mills. The governor's words reflect exactly why we are here. This summit is about ideas, but not abstract ones. It's about practical tools, tested models, scalable strategies. Over the next 2 days, we'll explore innovations in reshaping service delivery both here in Maine and across the country. We will hear how new technology, new partnerships, and creative thinking are expanding autonomy, improving quality of life, and supporting community inclusion. At the heart of these efforts is a shared belief that meaningful change does not come from doing more of the same. It comes from embracing new ways of thinking, from being open to what is possible, and from putting people, not programs, at the center of everything that we do. That mindset of curiosity, courage, and commitment is deeply embedded in our work at Maine Department of Health and Human Services. Through our home and community-based service innovation pilot grants, we've tested promising approaches to address long-standing challenges and build toward a better future. One of the main goals of these pilots was to explore new service models that could be integrated into our upcoming lifespan waiver. Over the past 2 years, we've supported 19 pilot projects, and I want to thank the many providers and organizations who made these efforts possible. Your work has laid essential groundwork for what's next. In addition, nearly 80 providers are now participating in lifespan readiness grants, preparing to offer the 17 new services envisioned in the waiver. This is a strong signal of momentum and shared commitment across the provider community. The lifespan waiver is a direct response to what individuals and families told us they need: a seamless, flexible system that supports people throughout their lives. We hope to begin enrolling new participants, especially youth and those not currently receiving services, by summer 2026. The waiver will support individuals through every life stage without requiring program changes, enhance supports for transitions from childhood to adulthood, offer innovative personalized service options, expand employment opportunities and inclusion, and strengthen long-term sustainability, especially in the face of workforce challenges. Several of those pilots that inform the waiver will be featured here at the summit, including remote support technologies that promote independence in housing, self-employment opportunities for people with IDD and autism, partnerships with schools to support youth in transition, shared living models for individuals with complex behavioral health needs, expanded self-advocacy opportunities for youth, and improved supports for people with both developmental disabilities and mental health needs. These are not just technical innovations. These are human-centered solutions. They reflect our commitment to designing systems with people, not just for them. Of course, innovation does not happen in a vacuum. We are navigating real challenges: workforce shortages, financial pressures, a national landscape in flux. Federal policy decisions will continue to shape what is possible, and like all states, Maine will adapt. But while the environment may be uncertain, our purpose remains clear. At the Maine Department of Health and Human Services, we are focused on practical, forward-looking strategies that meet people's needs and reflect their goals. We are committed to partnership, flexibility, and continuous improvement, so that no matter the challenge, our services remain rooted in dignity, choice, and equity. Collaboration is central to our work. It is how we build momentum, and it is how we will keep moving forward. The department and the Office of Aging and Disability Services are deeply committed to engaging individuals, families, providers, direct support professionals, and advocates in every step of this journey. This summit is a reflection of that belief, so I encourage you to take full advantage of your time here. Participate in sessions, ask questions, share your ideas, connect with someone new. There is wonderful energy and expertise in this room. What we learn from each other over these next 2 days will shape how we serve and support people in the years to come. Another exciting way to take full advantage of all that this summit has to offer is through the Tech Expo, happening alongside the conference. The Expo showcases products and services that support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, autism, CP, seizure disorders, and related conditions. It's open to both attendees and the general public, free of charge. There you'll be able to explore new assistive technologies, apps, and services, review results from several innovation pilot programs, try out equipment in hands-on demonstrations, and meet with innovators, experts, and advocacy groups shaping the future of service delivery. Whether you are here to learn, to connect, or to imagine the next bold step, I hope you will spend time at the Expo and see what is possible. As we look ahead, I am filled with hope, not because our challenges are behind us, but because of the people in this room. This summit is more than a gathering. It's a launch pad, a space where bold ideas take root and meaningful partnerships begin. And while we celebrate the progress that brought us here, we know transformation happens when ideas move beyond the conference and into communities. So here's my ask, my invitation to each of you. Take what you learn here, challenge the status quo, speak up in sessions, share your expertise, connect across disciplines and roles. Let this summit be a catalyst for new solutions, stronger networks, and lasting change. Because when we align our missions, lift up diverse perspectives, and act with urgency and heart, we don't just improve systems. We create opportunity, we build a better future. Let us shape that future together for every person in every community across Maine and beyond. Here's to a transformative 2 days and the progress that follows. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment. And thank you for the work that you do every day to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for your leadership and your opening remarks, and to the Governor for her valuable message. We are incredibly grateful for this administration's vision and commitment to improving the lives of all Mainers, as you've just described. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I just have a couple of housekeeping things to share. First of all, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our conference sponsors, TheraP, FEI Systems, and Give. You'll be able to visit their booths, as the Commissioner mentioned, when the Tech Expo opens at 1 o'clock today. And as the Commissioner mentioned, that's really going to be a great opportunity to visit with people, learn about new technologies. There's going to be a number of demonstrations that are in your handouts that will be happening over the course of the next couple of days. So we're hoping that people will really take advantage of that. Also, please do join us for the Tech Expo, from 4:30 to 6 for a reception this evening. So that'll be an opportunity to visit with colleagues and friends at that time and also see some of the exhibitors. There's a QR code on the tent table. If you haven't already downloaded the Whova app, it's a really cool app. And one of the things that's really cool is you get to see all the people who are here. So if you're not sure who's here, you can check it on the Whova app. You can also message individually. I've seen a lot of apps for conferences, and I think this one is pretty cool. We want to also announce that we do have a sensory room available in room 223. If you or anybody here has any questions or needs help finding things, we have a number of staff, and they have a badge that has a white ribbon that says host on it. You can go up to any of those staff. They're OADS and NDI staff who are here. They can help show you around if you need help finding the sensory room or the bathrooms, which are, Stefa. Back in the lobby, just around the corner by the elevator. Sorry, I didn't check that before I came up here. But feel free to ask anybody, as well as at the registration desk. Everybody's so helpful in wanting to help people feel welcomed here. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, somebody who embodies what it means to be a champion for inclusion and community. Hope Dittmeier has spent over 40 years working to ensure that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are supported to live full, meaningful lives where people have their own homes, good jobs, and a network of relationships that are not defined by disability. She has done this work in a wide range of roles, including early interventionist, family support specialist, regional administrator, trainer, and executive director of a provider agency in Louisville, Kentucky. Hope is the architect of an innovative curriculum, Endeavor for Excellence, based on social role valorization principles, which she taught internationally. One of her most significant accomplishments has been leading the transformation of a large segregated day program into one that provides fully individualized, community-based support, despite many challenges in the Kentucky Waiver Program. Most recently, she was honored with the Louisville Nonprofit Visionary Leadership Award. Hope is a fierce advocate for full inclusion. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Hope Dittmeier.
All righty. Wow, what an honor. Be in a room with 500 innovators to talk about innovation. It's an honor, but a little intimidating, to be honest. So I'm here today to share with you a story about innovation. It's just one local story of multiple transformations over a period of 70 years. That's a lot older than most of us in this room, right? But much has been learned from our story. My task today is to share this story, an abbreviated version and a straight line version, which is, of course, not the way it happened. But for the sake of time, I'm trying to focus on what are some of the most pressing lessons that we learned that are applicable today, that might inform or be relevant for your own work. So I hope you each find at least a nugget or two to take home with you that's practical and useful in your work. While my time with you is limited today, hold on a second, there we go. I have put together an agenda and will tell you that I wish I had twice as much time because the original list was twice this long. But what we're going to talk about today is Mattingly's legacy and history, how the journey began, the most recent iteration of our transformation, what initiated that, the challenging mindsets and how we dealt with those, letting go of the old so that there was room for new, addressing the impact of long-term wounding, people's life experience that comes with them, how SRV, or social role valorization, informed our process, the strategy we used for continuing to move forward, and finally, what Mattingly Edge looks like today. and some nice stories. Won't get to too many stories until the end. While my time with you is very limited, I believe the short 7-minute video really is the most concise way to give people the context of our transformation. So with that said, let's see if we can.
In the fall of 1947, a group of parents whose children had cerebral palsy approached Monsignor Felix Pitt. They asked that the Archdiocese of Louisville create a school to educate their children. Pitt agreed with 2 conditions: that the parents find their own classroom and that they find their own teacher. They did both. They found a vacant room in St. Aloysius School on Payne Street, and for a teacher they found Mary Mulligan, a 27-year-old Lexington native who was herself impacted by cerebral palsy. And so, on February 27, 1950, we opened as the Cerebral Palsy School of Louisville. That first year, we enrolled 13 children. Just 3 months later, with many problems and no clear answers, we nearly closed, but the parents would not hear of it. They found new and better space in a Knights of Columbus Hall at 5th and Chestnut, where in September 1950, we enrolled 17 children. That same year, Sister Mary Benedict Driscoll came from Cincinnati to become our first principal. She was part of the Sisters of Mercy, a community of Catholic women founded in 1831 in Ireland, and her appointment began a partnership with the Sisters of Mercy that would last for 46 years. In 1961, Reverend John Florsch donated a 2.5-acre lot on Baxter Avenue for a permanent school, and with Al Schneider as general contractor, we were ready for the 1962 school year. 2 years later, Sister Mary Benedict yielded her place to Sister Mary Georgianne Mattingly. Sister Georgianne would be the face and the heart of our agency for 32 years. Soon, though, public policies began to encourage inclusive education instead of segregation, and our last students graduated from the Cerebral Palsy School in 1993. But that was only the beginning of our work. In 1988, we established the day program for adults that continues to operate at Baxter Avenue, and that for many years defined our work. In her presentation to the board that launched that program, Sister Mattingly first voiced the Thomas Merton quote that would come to define us. In the end, it is the reality of personal relationships which saves everything. She declared that day that the day program will be a means to an end, the end being growth in relationship, leading to a full, rich life. And for 27 years, that program has provided rest for family caregivers, an alternative to sitting at home, a place for men and women to be safe and cared for in a setting apart from their communities and apart from their fellow citizens. And always, there have been those trademark smiles. But behind the smiles, there was trouble. Under economic pressure, our program grew first to 27, then to 34, then 45, then 50, then 60, and then 70, with the inevitable loss of personal attention and intimacy. And if we look deeper, the smiles hid something much more troubling. Something had gone badly wrong. Sister Mattingly's vision of a full, rich life, with a web of human relationships at the center, receded until, for most, it disappeared. We did good work. Our staff were good people. They cared deeply. But in truth, we're part of a system, and that system is bigger than we are. And if you look at the outcomes of that system, the outcomes are terribly distressing. The outcomes are lives drained of autonomy, lives drained of choice even over the smallest aspects of life, let alone the more fundamental aspects of life. Lives drained of dignity, drained of respect, devoid of the ability to contribute. But above all, always in the worst, is the isolation that the system creates. The crushing, suffocating isolation. The reality of lives lived entirely in special places created for people with disabilities, cut off from the ordinary places of life, and cut off from the ordinary people of life who are in those places. And so the truth is the system creates lives that none of us would accept. I wouldn't accept it, and you wouldn't accept it. And once you realize that, every organization, every person has a choice to make. Do we continue to do our part in that larger system, realizing what those outcomes are, or do we say, no, not us and not me? And we've made that choice. We have chosen.
Wow. So there's a few things that I'd like to point out about Mattingly's legacy. First, the organization reinvented itself a number of times. Rather than defending the current iteration, the current model of service, the organization has always sought out what they believed were best for the people, not good enough, but the best option for the people being served. Another thing that Greg pointed out in this video is that while for the most part, most people working in services to people are good people, trying really hard. But it's the models that we embrace that are often not good. And it's really important to separate these two things, especially if you're working toward transformation and innovation. There's no room to villainize anybody for anything, right? We're all doing the best we can, what we've taught, the way things have always been. But the point is, rather than making it about the people doing the work, let's make it about the models. It's the models that are broken. Right? It's the models to fall. So avoiding villainizing anybody or anything is an important part of any transformation. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Give me a second. It always takes me a minute to get the knack of this stuff here. All righty. So, what happened? Sorry, I've gotten ahead of myself here. All righty, there we go. So what we now call Mattingly Edge has its roots in 1947 when a badass group of parents and Catholic nuns were determined to offer children with cerebral palsy an education. At that time, children were not promised a free public education, so it was quite a radical notion. The idea that children with cerebral palsy could learn and were actually worthy of the investment of education. The founders were determined these children would have the chance to prove themselves as more than just dependent, broken bodies. They were confident that the children could learn if taught well. It took 3 years to become the Cerebral Palsy School of Louisville, and the challenges, as you heard, were formidable over the following 12 years. But they were determined, and they never gave up. For the next 25 years, students attended the Cerebral Palsy School of Louisville in increasing numbers and with many successes to boast. In this first iteration, I believe the important lessons that I've learned from that part of the story is that we must not underestimate people. We have underestimated people for so long, and that we need to ensure that any new innovation doesn't continue to do the same. And another lesson, the work of advocacy and innovation will never be easy, and it will be fraught with reason after reason to give up if we don't have absolute resolve and determination. Then in 1975, with the passing of Public Law 94-142 that entitled children to a free public education, the organization made a very difficult but very wise decision. They knew in their heart of hearts that attending the neighborhood public school with their non-disabled peers and their siblings would be a great advantage for the students, both educationally and socially. They didn't have the research or any evidence to back this idea. They went on faith. But they believed, quote, this is in our history books, it was thought to be of benefit to both normal and handicapped children. The normal children could conceivably learn care and compassion. The handicapped could feel themselves accepted and worthy of the dignity that would be theirs. And so they closed their successful school, proud of their achievement, knowing that they were part of the movement toward the widespread public education of all children. Perhaps the lesson here is to embrace inclusion over the resistance to change, to prioritize inclusion over the difficulty of change, knowing that everyone wins when we get it right. So what happened next? The founders recognized that there was still plenty of work to be done for people with disabilities to enjoy their best lives. They were especially concerned about students graduating with nowhere to go next. What typically follows education for most students, they asked themselves? Well, work. So the school transformed itself into an employment program. Just 10 years earlier, in 1965, the Vocational Rehabilitation Amendments expanded funding for sheltered workshops that were all the craze. The Cerebral Palsy School of Louisville proudly became Highland Opportunity Workshop. While it would not be a model we would embrace today, it was the very early examples of employment first. Perhaps the best lesson of this era was the need to embrace normative and typical and socially valued pathways to a good life. The concept of supported employment began in the late 1970s, and by the mid-80s, the concept was beginning to gain traction. The leadership at Highland Opportunities Workshop took notice of the rare stories of people with disabilities working in community businesses, and they wanted that for the people they supported. They began to have success finding jobs in the community for folks from the workshop with less impact of disability. Over time, the supported employment program at Highland Opportunity Workshop served more people than the workshop did, until the sole mission of the organization became supported employment. This left the 30,000 square foot built for purpose building no longer needed. A critical lesson demonstrated here is the importance of always inquiring about what would be even better than instead of the common defensive posture that many antiquated legacy programs maintain today. At this point in our history, few of the original founders were involved, and the Catholic community continued to provide leadership, particularly from Sister George Ann Mattingly. The concern of the day became the people who, at that time, were considered too disabled to work or whose families were too afraid because of the perceived risk involved. In 1988, the Mattingly Center for Continuing Education and Enrichment was formed and became the tenant of that 30,000 square foot building. And for 5 years, the program prided itself on serving the most significantly impacted people, often stating that they were there so that no one would be left out. Again, while we would not want to go about the work in the same way it happened in 1988, their commitment to supporting people who were more difficult to support was certainly admirable. The leadership at Mattingly Center for Continuing Education and Enrichment quickly recognized that serving people with a more significant impact of disability was an expensive venture. The funding simply didn't cover the real costs. As the video portrayed, the program continued to grow in numbers, hoping that economy of scale would address the financial challenge. Eventually, in 1993, the decision to become certified as an adult day health care program was made. This provided an additional $2.40 an hour increase in reimbursement. But the certification required many programmatic changes, including more medical personnel and more rigid medical institutionalized procedures. The Mattingly Center became well known for being the place that served the hopeless, people for whom nothing else was possible. Clearly, the lesson of this era points to the danger of chasing funding without regard to the impact it would have on the people being supported. This practice is still alive and well today, chasing the funding. Fast forward now 17 years. The Mattingly Center Board hired a new ED, the man you saw in the film, Greg Given. He was selected for his business acumen because at that point, the board was really concerned about fiscal issues. Now, Greg had no experience in intellectual and developmental disabilities, but in less than 2 years overseeing the program, he recognized that the outcomes from the services it was designed were terrible. As you heard him say, would not be acceptable to me or to my family. His lack of experience in the IDD field resulted in looking at the service as a human being, not a professional. He had no skin in the game. He had no ownership of the model. What an advantage. So Greg's curiosity led him on a journey to explore something different. He networked, read, and attended conferences. He learned that there were much more progressive models for support that did not rely on congregation and segregation. Now, this is when I entered the picture. Greg and I met, and he asked if I might be interested in joining him on a quest to transform the agency. He wrote a grant to hire a new part-time director of service innovation, and I was hired for that position. At that time, there were 100 people being served in the program, and for the next 18 months, I worked alongside Greg until he decided to retire, stating that it was time for an executive director who knew how to do the work itself. By that time, we were down to serving 91 people. So my experience in doing the work itself had been as the executive director of a small organization called Realizations, which was a small private organization where we supported 27 people to live in homes of their own, to work, and to have rich social networks and communities. So I had the experience of individualized and personalized services, and he believed that was very important. So during my first 18 months as Director of Service Innovation, I focused on a couple of things. One was to propose explicitly what our values, theories of practice, and theory of change would be. I proposed that we would embrace John O'Brien's 5 accomplishments as our values base. I proposed that we embrace social role valorization as our theory of practice, the how of the work, and that we embrace theory U, a theory about how change happens when it's done well. So for the purposes of today, with so little time, I'm simply going to kind of give you the references here to learn more about those things if you choose. Many of you would be familiar with John O'Brien, I'm certain, and his 5 accomplishments, which included the idea of relationships, that people's lives are enhanced when they have more and closer and mutual relationships, that people obtain and are respected when they hold valued social roles in society, that people have access to regular community places, not special, not separate, not different, but the same churches, the same places to work out, the same places to go to college, etc. That contribution is important. Our society is arranged and organized as a give and take endeavor, right? We all give what we can to others, and we take what we need. That's the nature of our society. And the problem, of course, for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is that they've always been seen as takers and that they have little to give. So it's important to help people be able to contribute and engage in that societal practice with other folks. And then finally, choice, or what we like to call autonomy, right? The ability to be in the driver's seat of your own life. So those became the 5 outcomes, the what we were about. Social role valorization became the how we would go about doing the work, how we would make decisions. And for the purposes of this presentation, what I can say to you is the basis, the premise of social role valorization is the idea that people access the good things in life, the same things that we all appreciate is making our life good, by playing valued social roles. What that tells us to do as providers and as families is, rather than focusing on how we keep people busy and engaged and having fun, to instead focus our work on helping people move into valued social roles. Theory U by Otto Scharmer is a theory about how change happens. It basically, on that first left-hand side of the curve, is about how you decide what's worth working toward. It's a process that says, go through these steps, and you will ultimately identify that which is worth working toward. And then up the right-hand side of the curve tells us what process to use to engage change and the order of change. Again, very, very useful. One of the other things I focused on during the first 18 months was appreciative inquiry. This is much to learn about for this tool, but in essence, it's about flipping the question. Instead of asking, what's wrong that needs to be fixed? The question becomes, what are we doing well that we could do more of? It's a liberating process. And up to this point, staff and board members and even some family members had been asked these kinds of questions, but people attending the program had not. I found that surprising, primarily because no one was confident they would have much to say. And so, in August of 2014, I asked 14 people, 14 folks who agreed to speak with me about this, to share their ideas with me. Their answers were consistent and telling. People, when I said, what would be better? I asked questions like, what's your favorite thing or part of Mattingly Center? What's your best memory? What was the best day ever here, right? And people told me their answers, and they were very consistent and fell into kind of 4 categories. The first one being that people loved the outings. They loved getting out of the building. Being out in the real world was preferred. right? Secondly, they wanted more personal attention. The day program had a 1-to-6 ratio, and because of the impact of disability most folks there had, they needed hands-on help to engage in anything. So do the math. That means you get about 8, 9, 10 minutes at the most, right, of staff time focused on you. But when people went to therapy, we had a therapy department there. When people went to therapy, they got one-to-one attention, so everybody loved therapy, right? They wanted more personal attention. New friends. The program at the time had a very active volunteer program, and so folks came through the program and spent a day or a half a day volunteering, and they got, college credit or kudos from their church members or whatever it might be. And the folks there at the program loved meeting those folks. They were, in their eyes, potential friends, but of course they disappeared and never came back. And the fourth was opportunities to contribute. People said, I can do more than they know I can do. Let me do more. So this guided our direction, right? This is from the mouths of the people in the service. Now, it's important to say that we needed to put this into context, because you could look at this list and say, be out and about in the world more. We need more vans so we can get people out for outings, right? That's what they want, outings, right? Or more personal attention. Let's just hire more staff. Cut that, individual time in half. Or new friends. Let's get more volunteers in here. Let's make sure there's volunteers every day so people can have new friends, right? And opportunities to contribute. That would have been a little bit harder to do in that setting. But we had to frame it, right? Frame it in a way that was consistent with where we were headed. So, at the end of that 18 months, when Greg asked me to be the executive director and the board asked me to be the executive director, I was wary. Had not been warmly welcomed by many staff and families. I understood I was a threat, right, to their security. I understood that. But I had to think long and hard about it, and I remembered something that Dr. Wolfensberger offered about leadership and change agentry. He said, often you only need to convince roughly 10 to 20% of decision makers to begin to adopt a new practice. Now that made it doable for me. I did the math. 91 people here times 20%, 18 folks. Surely we can get 18 folks to join us on a new mission, right? And so I accepted the position, but I did so with negotiations. After all, I was in a pretty good spot. Who'd want the job, right? Honestly, who would want the job? And so I was in a position to negotiate with the board. And I thought long and hard about it. And these were my negotiations, that they committed to social revalorization theory as a theory for decision-making at the board level and at the operations level. That we closed the front door, that we never accepted a new person into the ADT program, but instead offered people a new, individualized, and personalized way to be supported. That I be allowed to bring trained and experienced team with me. In my prior work at Realizations, I had really invested in 3 young people in particular who were SRV trained, who had the experience of how to do the work, who had stories of success that they could share, and the board agreed to hire the team, me and the 3 folks from Realizations. I also made it clear that they were going to have to really invest in this transformation, that we would have to go on learning journeys, we'd have to go learn from other people, we'd have to bring people in, that we would be operating 2 programs at the same time, the ADT, the traditional ADT, and the startup of a new individualized, personalized service. And as such, we would be operating at operational deficit, and that the board would have to be more involved, more time, and more tough decisions. They agreed to all of these conditions. So I went about. What I needed to do first was to impact the board's mindsets, because the board had the same mindsets the society and many families had, right? They were proud of the service. I mean, we got awards and stuff. so why wouldn't you be proud of what we were doing? And so we had to go about changing the board's mindsets. And the way that we did that was cafe conversations. If you're not familiar with that term, you should look it up. It's a great way to get people involved in thinking about change. You bring together folks sitting at a card table, 4 people, talking about, in our case, the 5 accomplishments. So we ask people, what do relationships look like in your life, right? Our board members. How did those relationships come about? What would your life be like if you didn't have them? And then we contrasted that to that of people we supported. We made efforts to increase interpersonal identification with people being supported. By that I mean the board really didn't know anybody with a disability, didn't know their life stories. And so we began to introduce board members to people being supported. We had workshops with renowned experts, including your own Gail Fanjoy, by the way, but John O'Brien and David Petoniak and Darcy Elks and, all kinds of big folks who came in and provided workshops for staff, for families, for participants, for board members. We did a personal storytelling at every board meeting. It started with 15 minutes where one of the people we supported came and talked about their lives. It was necessary to have some board turnover. We knew that there were some people that would never go for this idea, and we kind of helped them come to that realization. We had coffee, lunch, happy hour, repeat. Coffee, lunch, happy hour, repeat. I met with board members over and over again to test their own understanding and support of the idea. We did SRV training events and had follow-up opportunities for conversations about that over lunch. Several of our board members, several families, and several of the people we support went together to a TASH conference in Phoenix. And we brought in facilitators, outside facilitators, to help hold deep conversations. This picture is, you might recognize John O'Brien and Beth Mount, who came and met with our board for a weekend retreat to talk about tough things. So depending on the group that you're supporting, right, it's important to recognize what are the mindsets that get in the way. What is it that people hold as true that may or may not be true that keep change from happening? And in our case, it was that participants are sick or even dying. And there was all kinds of evidence to support this, right? It always blew me away when you walked in this big 30,000 square foot cinder block building. On both walls in the entry hallway were pictures of all the previous participants who had passed away. Of course they meant to do that, showing respect, but you can imagine, right? The feeling you'd have coming in there every day. We had lavish death rituals, so we had these big wreaths that when anybody in the program died, we put up on all the windows across the front of that building to basically say to the world, another one of us died, right? We had decided that, staff were wearing scrubs at the time, medical. What does that say? Sick people, right? We had 4 full-time RNs on duty. We had a sick room with 3 beds that were almost always full. We had most decisions in the program required the approval of the RNs who were there believing they were saving people's lives, right? And only nurses were allowed to help some people brush their teeth or have a meal. And everyone in the program had a do not resuscitate order. So we had to contradict, right? We kind of had to prove those aren't good messages. And so we did a number of things. We, of course, redecorated the hallway with more hopeful messages. We had participants participate in ordinary death rituals based on a personal relationship. So if you were close to the person who passed away, you did the same thing anybody else would do. You might make a dish at the day program that you take to their family, or the people who were close and were true friends, we took to the funeral home to visit. We banned medical attire in completion. We did a deep dive into clarifying real medical needs. What's real and what is historical? What is legacy, right? What have we been told that might not be true? We gradually reduced our nursing staff. I have to admit they were a formidable group, and I did that primarily through attrition. As people left, we just didn't replace them. And with family support, we taught the regular staff, the DSPs, how to brush people's teeth and how to feed folks who used a G-tube for meals. And we established a policy not to honor DNR in our program. And by that I mean families have the right to make that decision, but that we weren't going to stand by in our program and do nothing. That we would in fact call EMS and we would give EMS the DNR orders if that's what the family wanted us to do. But these were all things we did trying to shift the mindsets that were so dangerous. Another one, and I'm going to go through this a bit more quickly, but another one was that all of the people that attended the program were dependent and incompetent. So all activities of daily living were conducted by staff. People who could roll their own wheelchair places, staff pushed around for the sake of expediency, right? No one in the program took their own medication at the program, even when they did so at home. There was no effort to enhance competencies in areas of self-care, so we would claim we were teaching people to play go fish, right? Or what to do in the case of a fire. But we weren't really helping people become more competent in their own self-care. We had little to no accommodation, and mainly I mean technology, to increase the independence of people. There were no, in the whole building, there were no switches to help people turn things on and off for themselves, right? And in fact, the staff's identity was caregivers. That's what they thought they were there to do, to attend to people's personal care. And so we did individual surveys about what people could do, or could learn to do, or could partially do. So everybody now had a list of ways that they could be more participatory in their own care. We reallocated staff time to provide relevant and potent instruction. We consciously increased the expectations and the responsibilities of the folks there. So I said to Shanae, you know what? If you need to go to the bathroom, you're gonna have to roll yourself over there to the bathroom door. Right? That's your responsibility. We'll help you with the part you need help with once you get there, but you can get yourself there, right? We retrained staff about their roles. I have to say that wasn't hugely successful. And we had all staff trained in systematic instruction so they knew how to be good teachers. Another thing that we did was we really tried to emphasize the difference in people's lives between what was wounding. Social valorization tells us that when people are devalued, there's a whole set of things that they're likely to experience. Rejection, segregation, scapegoating, right? A whole list of things that happen. And those events, those experiences in life have an impact on who people become. And so it's important to be able to differentiate between what is related actually to the disability and what are just people's wounding experiences. And so we had to, we asked that question a lot. And how might we have misunderstood or misrepresented people? So we listened for things like, well, she has no interest in learning to drive, or he's just selfish, focused on himself. He doesn't care about anybody else. Or she loves Mickey Mouse, most important thing in the world to her. Or he can't read, we tried that before. All of those statements, we try to reframe the narrative to say, could this be a result of, could they love Mickey Mouse because all the gifts they get from the people they love the most are Mickey Mouse? How offensive would it be to say you don't want Mickey Mouse anymore, right? And so we reframed the narrative for staff. Another big, and this constituted a lot of work, a big piece of work, and was quite controversial, and that was what could we let go of so that we could do something different? What could we stop doing? And we used that money and that time and that energy towards something different, and there were a lot of things. We had 2 branches at the time. We had the large day program at Baxter Avenue, and we had a smaller satellite program where about 14 young adults attended. It was a very expensive program, and we decided to close the door of that program. We offered all 14 of those people a different individualized, personalized service. Some took us up on it, but others decided to attend the larger day program at Baxter Avenue. So we didn't kick anybody out. We discontinued case management services primarily because at this time, the new independent case management was required, and we were so interested in creating a new option for people. Why would we have case managers referring people to the congregated, segregated options? And so we wanted to put all of our energy in creating something different. We opted out of the federal food program. We got some money to help cover the cost of lunches. Lunch was chaotic. Everybody had different meal requirements. Different people had pureed food, allergies. People were fed all different kinds of ways. And when we did a time study about what it cost us to draw down the funds, those federal funds, actually, it cost us more to do the federal program than not. So we discontinued providing lunches. People had to bring their lunch from home. We divested of all of our large vans and stopped doing outings. This was when my life became in danger, right? Discontinuing outings. But think about it. We were trying to help people in our small local community be involved as individual citizens, seen as valued and contributing citizens, and parading groups of 6 and 8 people to go get ice cream, right? Told society something completely different. It defied what we were trying to do. Again, we worked on reducing nursing staff. We also stopped providing behavior support services because most of the plans in our program were forcing people to be quiet about how unhappy they were at the service. It wasn't consistent with our beliefs. And so we discontinued doing that. We decided we weren't going to invest in this old building anymore, and so we had buckets around catching rain from the roof because we weren't going to invest in a building that we hoped to no longer need in the near future. I enlisted a couple of people from the day program to go around and to point to or to pick up and to help us notice all the childish toys and games and books and movies. We pulled people together and they boxed up all of these items, and we took them not to the Goodwill, but to a children's program. Gave us a lot of chance to talk about the difference between adult behavior and childish behavior, right? We ceased referring to the ADT as work. People had been going there forever and then going to work, right? And how confusing is that when you're really going to start really talking about work for people, right? And so we discontinued that language, and we discontinued that volunteer program that people liked on the surface, but really was a harmful experience over and over to have people come in, look at you, watch you, get credit for that, and go on in their lives, and you're still there. So that was a lot to change, and it freed up a lot of resources and a lot of time. So Dr. Wolfensberger, one of the other parts that he is writing about change agentry is helpful, is that he says one of the first things you can do is fuel discontent, right? So what we did first is we used a raise your hand. Who is already discontent and is courageous enough to be an early adopter and try something new? That resulted in a handful of early adopters. And so the next question was, we needed to create discontent. And you do that by exposing your own inadequacies. Talk about a hard thing to do. Pointing out the failure of your own system is a very humbling thing to do. And so we began to contrast, right? This compelling persuasion that says, this is what it's like here, it's not good, this could be potentially better, and helped people understand that. But we came to realize what Dr. Wolfensberger said, and I think this is a really important thing to say. It's not good, but it's important. And that is, we came to recognize that both human service personnel and family members are inoculated or vaccinated against seeing the atrocities within any program. They're chronically exposed, and it just becomes the way of the day instead of seeing it through a different lens. And so once you've created some discontent, right, it's important to know when it's time to form alliances. Dr. Wolfensberger talks about that this forming of alliances, that a big part of that is hope. Imagine that. The belief that if one actually engages in relevant action, there is a reasonable chance that something positive can be done about the situation in which there is discontent. What we learned is there were more people who were discontent, really, but they didn't know it because they didn't know the alternatives. They didn't know of other chances. So one of our first alliances was with Stephen. Stephen's mom raised her hand and said, Stephen used a wheelchair. He had his meals through a G-tube. He had a vagus nerve stimulator, had a tracheostomy. He didn't use words, and he had splints on his arms, which made it difficult to use his arms. To say we were a little intimidated was not an understatement. And so we began, I'll describe a little bit more about the process in a bit, but we began to figure out where in the world does Stephen belong. And we found very close to his home a community center. And that community center on Friday afternoons had a group of men who came together for cornhole tournaments and have lunch together. And we thought, well, Stephen should go check that out and see. It's right in his neighborhood. It's free, which is, you all know is a big challenge always, right? And so Stephen went with a support worker and observed one Friday. And they came back to the office and said, the supporter said, I think there's possibility there, but I don't know what to do next. I said, just go back again. They've met him before. Now just go back again, show up. Well, little did we know that those men were primarily engineers. They were captivated by the idea of some mechanical device that would help Stephen catapult the beanbag. They spent the next 4 Friday afternoons not playing cornhole, but building the contraption you see in that picture there so that Stephen could put his elbow on it and it would shoot the beanbag. Now, who'd have thunk it, right? We would have thought, oh, we need some kind of physical therapist to come in here and, assess the situation and da-da. These were citizens who wanted Stephen to be able to enjoy the same thing they did. Wow. What an impactful story we went back to the service with. Another person who was discontent was Ellie, and Ellie used a wheelchair, was legally blind, has cerebral palsy, has an intellectual disability, and the weight of her life experience was heavy. She had a lot of mental health challenges. Ellie always told us she wanted to work. So if we could figure out a good job for Ellie, right? And so Ellie is there working at the YMCA where she inputs important historical data into their archives as a job. Going back to the program and saying, guess what? Ellie's working. I'm going to skip this one, and I will send out the link to it just for the sake of time. It's a story about a woman named Donna that's really heartfelt. So what do we do about the profoundly reluctant, right? What do we do about that? And so we decided that as a service, we would engage in mini discovery, right? We didn't have a lot of time. We didn't have the ability to go out with people, but that we would look at what are their assets? What do they bring to the table, right? Whether it's skills or knowledge or passion or enthusiasm or life experience, what interests them, right? What are they motivated by? What do they want to do? Right? What do they do when nobody's asking them to do anything? And conditions. Under what circumstances are people most successful? So is it early in the day, late in the day, in crowds and quiet places, et cetera, et cetera. And the center of that there is where you find what we call the sweet spot. And we thought if we could imagine that for people, when we attended their annual plan of care meetings, we could say, well, what do you think about? Would you like, you care a lot about veterans, your dad was a veteran, you love music, you're a nighttime person. What do you think about going to the local veterans to do karaoke on Friday nights, right? That was more appealing than saying, would you like to try community services, right? We were able to offer people very concrete. We did a lot of storytelling, telling people stories of other people who had been successful. And we decided that 3 strikes, you're out. In other words, 3 years in a row, we would make these kinds of offers, along with the stories of all the other people in the program who had taken advantage of it. But after 3 times, we would leave you alone, right? We would leave you alone. One of the things during that time that we often referenced, right? Because we were asking people to be more conscious about what was true, that we were actually harming people. It's a really hard thing to say. And so we use this quote a lot: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. You can't be held responsible for having done something 10 years ago if you didn't know any different, right? And so I gave people. And so the journey continued, and we rebranded, as the video showed, in November of 2014. And the change became real to people. And the reluctant folks became very vocal, understandably so. We also had been supporting so many people in these stories that I shared who went home to residential services and who residential services were threatened by this move and often sabotaged the work. And so we realized that if we were really going to help people have a good life, we had to be more than just a day program, that we had to be able to think about people's whole lives. And at this point, there were 80 people in the program. So in October of 2017, we discontinued all-day services. 18 people chose to come with us to Mattingly Edge, and 45 participants chose adult day training. We honored that, and we said, we want to help you. We want to help you. We took people to visit other day programs that they could sign up for. We actually sold that 30,000 square foot building to a provider that was known in our community as being one of the better providers, and negotiated and arranged that that new service would serve everybody in the program and hire or interview at least the existing staff. We did our best to honor what people said to us. I want to stay here, I want to stay here with these people, and I want to stay here with this staff. And we made that happen for 45 people. And so Mattingly Edge, what's our mission? To cultivate partnerships. In other words, we don't see ourselves as the provider of everything, but that we have to work in partnership with community options that enable people with disabilities to thrive. The bar is higher, not survive, not get through the day, but to thrive at work, at home, and in relationships. And that our mission is based on the belief that people with disabilities have the right to the same privileges and responsibilities as other citizens. We know that communities are better when everybody is included. So what's different about Mattingly Edge? One of the big things that's different is the problem is no longer defined as the person. They aren't the problem. The problem is exclusion. The problem is they've been left out and not included and have little control over their lives. So that became our problem to solve. We also made a commitment to employment first, that work is the default options of how adults spend their time. And we designed, and this is a really important part, our staff and our model design literally has the person at the center. So the orangish, peach, whatever, larger person there is the person being supported. The folks around them in that blue, green, teal color are their support team. So at Mattingly, we recruit, we screen people, and the folks being supported interview and have hiring and firing decisions over their own staff. So those folks in the teal, blue color there, work for the person at the center of their team. The person, the kind of marigold person there on the side, is a team lead. That team lead's job is to help the person being supported to manage and organize and train their staff folks, right, to help them have the autonomy to do that. And some people need a lot more help than others in that regard. And then the kind of purplish periwinkle person there is a flex time person who can kind of fill in. So the design of staff is centered around the person. We say that the folks in the teal there work for the person. The marigold and the purple person works for me, right? Although we also said that in our visioning with people, and we do vision with everybody we support, their vision needed to tick these 6 boxes, as they say in Ireland. The vision needs to be a typical one, that you'd find other people their age and gender and culture would have the same, that it needed to be socially valued, viewed as a positive and admirable thing by society, that it had to be personalized, not cookie cuttered, that it needed to have the right amount of challenge, right? Because we want to have high expectation, that it needed to be relational and pay attention to who the people involved would be, and that it would be roles-based, that roles would be named in their vision. One of the other things that makes us different than many programs today is our reliance on what's called the culturally valued analog. I don't care if you remember that term, but remember the phrase, how do other valued citizens of the same age, gender, and culture accomplish this? So the question is, how do young men in Louisville get physically fit? Graham there on the left attends the Jewish Community Center for all of his exercise classes, and I included that smaller insert picture of his foot there because guess what? Again, we didn't have to figure out how he could go spinning. Guess who figured it out? The folks at the Y, the other people in his class, figured out how to get his foot attached so it would stay on the... So people do care. People want folks to be included when we set it up properly. On the right there is Robin. Robin attended the day program for many, many years. My office was on the opposite side of the building from the day program by design, and I could hear Robin scream whenever anybody was wheeling him into therapy. He was sick and tired of physical therapy, and he hated it. But when we got him a personal trainer at the local cool guys, masculine, a place reeks of masculinity, he loved it. And his sister said, I've never seen him this strong, even when he was a kid. All right? Where do professional artists make and sell their art? This is Sebastian on the right. Sebastian is a man we supported. Sebastian is autistic. He's a very good artist. In fact, he's there in his studio at... can't think the name of it right now. It'll pop out in just a minute. But at his studio where he hangs out with other artists, sees their artwork, is inspired by what shows are they going to, what are they doing. The picture on the far left there is what we call the Mosaic Awards, once a year in Louisville. There's an award ceremony for foreign-born citizens who have shown leadership in our community. And they always have given some kind of art to the recipients. The first year, Sebastian was asked to do that. He and his team came up with a brilliant idea. Instead of doing one thing and making 8 of them and giving everybody, he did a mosaic of the national bird from their home country. I almost felt sorry for the recipients that year because the buzz was all about the awards. Now, all over and over and over. The middle picture there is Sebastian in New York City, the Children's Museum in New York City, where he was commissioned to go and learn some of his mosaic work. If I can just do 2 more minutes, is that okay? I'm at my time. But another thing we focus on is competency enhancement, what people want to learn, what they want to learn, and learning those things in real life settings, not in a practice kitchen, in somebody else's kitchen. And so you see on the left there, Claire learning her DSP, helping her learn how to use adapted knife so that she can do food prep, and she can be part of, with her mother and father, making dinner at night in a valued adult social role in her family. Shanae there learned to make her mother's famous beef stew. Her mother had passed away, and she wanted to have her brother and sisters over on Sundays after church to host in her home, and so she needed to learn how to make her mom's famous beef stew. And Graham there on the right wanted to learn to kayak because he thought he'd meet cool guys if he knew how to kayak. and image enhancement, which goes hand in hand, paying attention to what things look like, because oftentimes the way things look keep people at a distance. And so images of adulthood are important, and the two left pictures there is Sebastian. Sebastian is part of a large Hispanic family, and they get together very often. And Sebastian had no interest in learning to cook, so he really didn't have a valued social role there. And we said to Sebastian, what do you think about being the wine server? You uncork the bottle of wine. You let it, do all the stuff where you swirl it and let it rest and whatever, stiff it or whatever, and pour for other folks. What if you learned to do that? And he was very interested. You can imagine the reaction of his family when Sebastian is in this very adult role. And on the right-hand side is Robin on his moving day. One of the things Robin is seen as, and sometimes behaves as a child, part of that vicious cycle, right? And so at his housewarming party in the middle of COVID, we made sure there was champagne, to pop champagne. So the focus on roles and the focus on one person at a time and the focus on believing that community wants people to be there and will help us out within reason, right, are important parts of our legacy at Mattingly Edge. I'm out of time. I'm not out of material, but I'm out of time. So I will tell you, we didn't make time for questions because it's a pretty large group. But as you can probably tell, I love talking about this stuff. So anybody who wants to approach me, I'll be here the next two, today and tomorrow. And I have a session in the first breakout sessions on more about social role valorization. It won't be about this transition, but I will stick around outside that room afterwards just to know where I'm at if anybody wants to come find me to chat. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started with our next plenary session. This is going to be an opportunity for folks to engage a little bit more with the panel, which we're excited about. I'm going to have the two facilitators introduce their panel, or they'll be introducing themselves as they go along. But I did want to just take a minute and introduce the two facilitators today. First of all, Lisa Sturdivant has over 40 years of experience. Lisa, you want to raise your hand right there? Providing supports and services to people with disabilities in Maine, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. She spent most of her career advocating for getting it right when we talk about community inclusion and employment for people with disabilities. She is currently the Community Employment Manager at the Office of Aging and Disability Services. And she and Lisa Mills, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute, will be facilitating this panel, which is made up of folks who have developed and managed innovation pilot projects. Sorry, I don't have my handy-dandy, oh, for God's sake. Huh? So next, I'm going to introduce Dr. Lisa Mills. She's a consultant to the Maine Department of Health and Human Services. She's assisted with the design and development of the lifespan waiver. Previous to this role, Dr. Mills was the lead subject matter expert on Maine's HCBS Settings Rule Compliance Initiative. Lisa lives in Wisconsin and has worked in more than 25 states on community services, employment initiatives, and affordable housing. She has 2 adopted sons, each of whom experience disabilities, which brings her personal experience with using special education, children's waiver program, vocational rehabilitation, and mental health services. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Betsy, and hello, everybody. We're really pleased today to have 5 folks here to talk about their work on the innovation projects. You may have heard earlier the mention about Maine's funding of providers to think about and implement ideas for innovation. So there were 19 total projects, but we have 5 here today that really focused on community inclusion and employment. And we're going to ask each of them to start by introducing themselves and telling you a bit about their projects.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Klein, and I'm an employment specialist at the Office of Aging and Disability Services. And for the past 2 years, I have had the pleasure of working on a fun little project called Self-Employment for Me. And the reason we really wanted to focus on self-employment is because we were hearing from waiver members across the state about their desire to open up their own businesses. And they really didn't know how to get started. And in thinking about that, we realized that we actually didn't know how to help them get started either. So that was really one of the reasons why we wanted to do this self-employment project, so that we could work on expanding opportunities for people to own and operate their own businesses. And one of the first things that we did was create an advisory group that included providers from across the state, as well as representatives from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, the Maine Developmental Disabilities Council, and OADS staff. And we wanted to look at what was happening in our state in terms of services and supports that were available, what was working, what was not working. We also wanted to look at tools and resources that were available to support people around self-employment. And we also wanted to think about different partnerships that we could leverage across the state, again, to support people to pursue self-employment. And one of the other things that we wanted to look at was what was happening nationwide. So we really took a look at what was happening in other states, and that led us to Rhode Island. And if you don't know, Rhode Island has a really robust self-employment pilot project that they've been working on for the past 8 years. So we were able to connect with Sue Bateman from the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council and her team. And they really have been really good mentors to us in providing guidance about how to get started. Because again, we really were just at the beginning stages, and we were able to learn from their experience of what they had already accomplished. And one of the first things that we learned from Sue and her team was the importance of entrepreneurial education. They had developed a curriculum in Rhode Island that they shared with us, and we took that curriculum and we revised it, we adapted it to make it very Maine-based, and then we were able to use that curriculum as a foundation to start our own classes here in the state of Maine. And we, in terms of partnerships, we were able to partner with New Ventures Maine, which is an organization that is part of the University of Maine system. They have business advisors, and they really focus on helping people with small business development. So we use them as our instructors because, of course, they have the expertise in business. We as social service people do not necessarily have that background. So it was really helpful to have them be able to teach that content and also act as mentors to the people going through our classes, and also provide some help in developing their business plan so that they can get that business up and running. We also know that it takes money in order to get a small business up and running, so we wanted to be able to provide some startup costs for that to happen. So we also partnered with the Maine Developmental Disabilities Council to offer up to $1,000 for that startup cost to people who have completed the class series. Also, as part of the pilot project, we really wanted to raise expectations about what is possible for people in terms of self-employment. So we worked with a really great videographer who's based here in Maine, and we've been able to create some really great videos that we will be able to share across the state, again, to raise expectations. And we also were able to work with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation to think about ways that we could really collaborate and coordinate services, again, to improve self-employment outcomes for people with disabilities across the state. And lastly, it gave us a chance to really think about lifespan, which was mentioned a little bit earlier today. When Lifespan opens, there is a proposed service for self-employment. So all of the things that we've been able to learn throughout the course of this project have really helped us kind of develop that service and create some really good quality tools and resources that can be used to really help people start their own businesses and do something that they really love to do.
Hello, my name's Roland Paulette. I'm the regional supervisor for Momentum. And Momentum looked at transportation issues of people that we provided work supports for. And through discussions that we had with these clients, we determined that over 50% of the participants had significant transportation issues using the current NET system. So we focused on a new solution that bypasses the structural challenges of the Maine NET system and focused on a practical solution that was market-based. And in our innovation grant, we partnered with Uber to provide ride-hailing services to those folks that we provide work supports to for employment-related transportation. And as a part of the model, Momentum proposed an expansion of self-directed options, including client management of their own transportation budgets. Participants self-directed their budgets with assistance for their case manager and their PCP team. And the innovation grant gave participants the ability to self-monitor their transportation budgets, which enhanced their ability to get to work while improving the perceptions of employers, supervisors, and coworkers. We trained all of the participants on the use of the Uber app. They each had a smartphone that they downloaded the app to and set up an account. And we trained them in the use of that app, the process for paying for the rides, the hailing the rides, identifying the car that's going to be picking you up and the driver, so that it was as safe and reliable as a transaction for the participants. Each time that the participants needed funds for their Uber wallet, we provided those funds to them from the grant. They downloaded that into their Uber wallet and then used those funds to purchase the rides. They were responsible for hailing all of their rides for any work-related transportation, and that was according to their work schedule, which could, change on a day-to-day basis, might be after hours or on the weekends or even during holidays. So they were responsible for coordinating all of those rides. When they completed the ride, they were also responsible for, again, paying the driver. Part of the grant also included that they were responsible for tipping the driver 15% for a successful ride. We worked with the participants as well that they would have to provide a rating on the driver according to Uber's 5-star system. So they got to rate the driver and the vehicle and the cleanliness of the vehicle and if they arrived to work on time. And we also talked with them about the fact that the driver would be rating them as a customer on that ride, and that so their participation or their behavior during that ride would be rated by the driver. There were two primary areas that we talked about over the course of the the grant, and the first one was to increase the success rate of employment-related transportation. Again, the participants that we were dealing with had been looking at almost a 50% failure rate for their rides to employment. So you can look at that and think, if anybody here couldn't get to work on time or couldn't get to work at all, only 50% of the time, chances are your job's not going to be there very long. So we defined a successful ride as the client arranged the ride through Uber. The Uber ride showed up on time. The client was transported to work and arrived on time. And the client then closed out the ride by paying and rating the driver. And as I mentioned previously, they were looking at around a 50% success rate prior to that. Using the Uber grant over the course of about 14 months, we had the grant in total. At the end of it, our success rate was 97% of the time that they arrived to work on time. So it did have a significant increase in success rate for that transportation. The second thing we were looking at was, would it be a cost-effective system for the state of Maine? And we found that it was just almost compatible to the current NET cost for each individual client to either use the NET system or to use Uber. It was almost the same cost. There were some small cost savings in using Uber compared to the NET system, but we were able to determine that cost would be pretty much on par for the same cost that the NET reimbursement is. We provided, during the grant, we provided a total of 1,727 rides to clients, again, over the course of about 14 months. And like I said, at a success rate of 97%. Oh, you have your...
Good morning. My name's Stephanie DeRocher. I'm the Program Manager for Benefits Counseling Services at Maine Health Vocational Services. Benefits Counseling Services helps people who are on Social Security Disability Benefits, SSI or SSDI, understand if they go back to work, what happens to their Social Security benefits and any other public benefits they get, like food stamps or housing assistance, Maine Care and Medicare. There's a fear of loss of benefits if someone were to go to work, but in fact there's a lot of safety nets or work incentives that allow someone to go to work and not impact their benefits. Maine Health Vocational Services has been offering this service since 2002. We currently have 6 CWICs, or Community Work Incentives Coordinators, benefits specialists, benefits counselors. We go by lots of names, but our role is to help people understand individually what happens to benefits when they go to work. Not sure if you're aware, but Maine has about 70,000 working-aged Mainers who are receiving Social Security disability benefits. We rank 6th highest per capita in the country for the number of people who receive benefits. And we have 6 counselors, CWICs, and we serve about 1,000 people a year. Not all of those 70,000 are seeking benefits counseling, but we see as many people as we can with the capacity that we have. In Maine, we're really fortunate that we have 6 CWICs. Other states have 1 or 2 for very large states. And we're able to have 6 currently because of state and federal contracts that we receive that allow the service to be free for the individual seeking the service. As part of the innovation grant, we're always looking to expand our capacity. We want to try to get that message that work is possible. There's a lot of safety nets. You won't lose all your benefits to as many people as possible. So when this innovation grant came about, we proposed hiring 2 additional CWICs to serve solely individuals on Section 21 and 29. And our model was testing doing something a little bit different than what we currently do. Our staff cover regional counties, so we have one person that covers Cumberland, another person that covers Penobscot and Piscataquis counties, for example. And under this innovation grant model, we proposed recruiting up to 6 agencies that we would have a dedicated CWIC housed with. So rather than being assigned to the CWIC based on your geographical region, we wanted to try to test the idea of building relationships with individual HCBS provider agencies. So we sought out to recruit 6. We ended up having and working with 5. Those 5 agencies that we partnered with were Amicus, Independence Advocates of Maine, KFI, Creative Work Systems, and Waypoint. And so our 2 CWICs the goal was to serve up to 200 people over the course of the innovation grant, and we ended up having referrals from over 208 individuals over the course of our time, so it was a great success. We also were working with the agencies to try to provide what we call work and benefits navigator training and technical assistance. We currently provide that as an agency. We're constantly going out to agencies and getting the word out about our service, and also provide trainings about 6 times a year where someone can come in and learn the ins and outs of Social Security benefits as a provider rather than being in a benefits counseling meeting. So one of our models was also to provide that training directly to the agencies, instead of what would typically happen is 1 or 2 people from their agency would come to the session and bring it back to their agency. So we were able to provide that to every agency, all their frontline staff. We ended up providing training to almost 140 direct staff at each of those agencies. I'm going to share, or save, I should say, kind of our key lessons learned for a little bit later when we have our questions and answer portion. But if anyone's interested in learning more about our project, feel free to come down to the expo table. We have a short executive summary that you can check out our key findings.
Okay. My name's Kristen Overton, and I am the Executive Director of Skills, Inc. Skills is headquartered in St. Albans, Maine, which is in Somerset County, for those of you who are wondering where that is. And we are a nonprofit who has been supporting people for more than 60 years. Our project really revolved, well, we had 2 projects. One was around employment services, and the other was around transportation. While over the course of many, many years in providing residential services, day programs, community support, employment support, the one thing that we find is that, especially in rural Maine, transportation is non-existent. And so when we were looking at how does someone really truly become fully integrated in their community and part of the community, you have to be able to get to the community, because in most rural areas, the community isn't just walking out your door and being there. And so that is how our idea of Opportunities Driving School came to be. And so we were looking at developing a program where we would have a licensed occupational therapist do a driving assessment on individuals and let us know who maybe was ready to drive and who maybe wasn't quite yet, and then we would do driver's education. Very quickly, we learned that there was a little bit of a bias towards those assessment and that assessment process. In most cases, those types of assessments have been done on individuals who already had their license but might have lost the ability to drive. And so it was instead getting someone back to driving rather than determining whether or not someone would be able to drive. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board. Our technical assistance person, Becky, was fantastic. She was always telling us, we're innovating, it's okay, no one's done this. So we kind of said, all right, well, how do we determine whether or not, how do we meet that need? So we did some research, and we found a driving simulator. And when I say a simulator, I don't mean, it's not like a video game. It is, it feels like a car. It has the car door. It has a steering wheel. So you really feel like you're in a car. It was developed specifically for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism. And so it even makes noises. It rumbles a little bit. So you really feel like you're in the vehicle to make sure that people kind of know what to expect. And so we developed the simulator with a screening process. And of course, now is the second that my iPad decided to die, so that I can't tell you exactly which those tests are. But we use 4 different tests. One is a maze test, and really to kind of go through and determine. So we go through a screening process. And then we put people on the simulator. And they're on the simulator for at least half an hour, and that usually gives us a good general idea of whether or not someone is ready to potentially move on to driver's ed, or whether they could benefit from more time on the simulator. So while we started with an idea of just driver's ed, one of the other things that we really realized during the process was that the simulator, that we kind of, thinking back, everything always seems so simple until you actually try to do it, right? And so we were looking at, is someone ready or is someone not? But what we actually found was that in so many cases, there was an emotional kind of barrier to have to overcome with the people that we were supporting, because their whole lives they were told, oh, you can't drive, you'll hurt someone. Or you can't drive, you would hurt yourself. Or that's not for you. And so there was a component of some anxiety for a lot of people having to overcome that component of it as well. And then there's pre-driving skills that we don't think about are part of everyday life that maybe people haven't been exposed to, like saying, oh, that's, we can't go, that's a stop sign, we can't go until it's green. So just very, small things about what is a gas pedal, what's the brake, what do all these different pieces do. So in some cases, we had people who had never driven anything before getting into the simulator and testing some of that. So our project turned into simulator services, so helping individuals kind of work through that simulator, building up pre-driving skills. And then we also provided driver's education, so we became a licensed driving school with 2 licensed Class A instructors, where we would provide small group, because for us, I don't know anyone else here, but my son in the past 2 years has gone through driver's ed, and it was 30 kids in a room. We didn't think that was probably the best method. And so we did a small group of only 4 individuals at a time in a class. So it could be really supported. We could take a lot of time and look at people's individual learning styles to make sure that they were really truly understanding the content. Proud to say that we had in our very first permit test, we weren't sure how that was going to go. The lowest score was a 96. So it was very exciting. So people were doing really, really well. And since then, we have had 4 people get their licenses. But it really just showed us, and then after the driver's ed, we also did the continued support, because that last part of driving is also practicing. And so you get 10 hours of practice in driver's education. It might take more than 10 hours. And in some cases, if someone's living in a residential home, being a residential home provider as well, we know that our insurance, we had to get completely different insurance because our insurance will not let people drive our vehicles. So we had to buy a specific vehicle with different insurance. So if someone lives in a group home or is the shared living provider, it's possible that they may not be able to practice in someone else's vehicle. Or they might not have that support network around them. So that was a big part of our grant also, was then doing continued support driving all the way up to the point point of getting the license. And in most cases, people felt most comfortable driving our vehicle, so we even let them use the vehicle for their license test. So that really was kind of what the project, kind of what we originally thought it would be and what it kind of evolved into.
Good morning. My name is Brett Bulmer. I'm the Executive Director of Independence Association based in Brunswick. And I hope it's okay to do this. I wanted to do a quick shout out to the team from NDI over here. They were incredible when we were working on our innovation grant project. Doug, there's just no nicer man in the world than Doug Keast, I tell you. He's just a, he's great. Doug was just wonderful to work with, and I probably shouldn't start mentioning names because I can't remember them all, but I also want to mention Gayla, who was our subject matter expert. Gayla, we started off with an SME at the beginning of the project who had left to go work for another employer, and so Gayla stepped in midstream, and you wouldn't know it. I mean, she very quickly learned our project and was very supportive and helpful. So I just want to thank you for the work that you did with us. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So our project is what we call a community integration app. We named it the Activity Board. And you might be wondering, why did we call it the Activity Board? Well, we didn't. The people that we support did. You should have seen us trying to come up with a really creative name for this app. Picture a group of seasoned veterans in the disability services field sitting in a room, throwing out all these creative ideas and names. We even got AI involved. Started plugging in keywords into AI. And we thought we were so clever, and we were so impressed with ourselves. And we came up with about 3 or 4 great names for this app. And we said, well, let's present this to our folks and see which one they want to use. And they said, no, we don't like any of them. We want to call it the Activity Board. So that's why we call it that. Like many of you who run various community support programs, we had in our center, if you want to call it that, a big white board. It was a magnetic dry erase board with a grid on it, and it was a calendar, and we put all our activities and events on there, and the folks that we support would come in and put their initials by the ones they wanted to go to or participate in, and we thought, why don't we take that and digitize it, make it digital, make it electronic. And our hope we hope a few things would arise out of that. First of all, it was our observation that several or many of the folks that we support didn't have a lot of experience with technology. They were intimidated by it, and we thought this was an opportunity to expose them to technology. And as we developed the product, we were very mindful of other places in the community where they would encounter technology, whether it was the self-checkout at the grocery store or the ATM. We wanted the skills that they were learning using the app to carry over to those situations. And the other thing, when you have a whiteboard at a center like that, you have to go to the center to sign up for something. You got to be there. We thought, wow, if we could digitize this and they could have access to this anywhere, they have internet access, they could sign up at home after dinner. They could be on their cell phone with their friends going out to eat and say, I think let's see what's going on this week, and sign up for an activity they wanted to go on. So the way this app works is we survey the community for various activities, events, resources, things that are going on in their chosen communities. We'd enter that information into this app, and then our individuals each have their own profile, if you would, or they could log into the app, see what's going on, and indicate which ones they want to attend. And then on the back end, our community integration manager arranges the staffing and transportation if it's needed. As we were developing the app, we were very mindful of accessibility. We use a lot of pictures, icons, very clean, crisp colors. There's even a read aloud function. I've got a story about that I'm going to tell real quick. Again, the group of seasoned veterans sitting in the room trying to figure out how we're going to do this. We came to this matter of the read aloud function. We knew we wanted an icon to indicate, click this button if you want to hear a reading of the description of the event and what you needed to do in terms of the cost and where to be and so forth. And we had it narrowed down to 2 icons, but we were split. Half of us thought it should be this icon, the other half thought it should be that one. And we must have gone on for 20, 30 minutes, and we were just spinning our wheels. And some really smart person, I can't remember who it was now, said, hey, don't we have some folks downstairs right now doing a cooking class? Why don't we bring them up, have them look at this? Okay, that sounds like a good idea. So I'll never forget this, and I remember telling Gayla the story. the folks came up, sat down, and I think it was Katrina, who's also here with me, one of my coworkers. She explained to them. She showed them the two icons and very simply said, if you were on your computer and you wanted to click a button that would read something aloud, which one would you push? And without hesitation, all four of them said, oh, that one. It was so obvious to them. And it was a kind of a humbling moment for me. I think those of us who have been in this field a long time, sometimes we can fall into the trap of thinking that we know what's best or we know what our people need or want without asking them. And it was a humbling moment for us to realize, hey, we need to include them in the process. I could go on and on about the app and all the different features and functions, but for the sake of time, I won't. We are in the expo downstairs. If you want to see it, I can demonstrate it to you. It's a lot of fun. If I'm not at the table, I'm going to leave a stack of my business cards there if you want to grab a card, if you want to email me with questions or want more information. Just real quickly, I want to just wrap up by talking about some of the impact or the outcomes of the project. First of all, I think we did see an increase in skills when it comes to technology. I remember some of our folks, when they first encountered this program, it's all touch screen compatible. Even just managing a touch screen can be tricky if you've never done it. How much pressure do you apply? How fast do you move your finger? And people that were very intimidated by it are now just doing it. It's like it's second nature to them. They don't. Another thing that we noticed is the data shows that we had an increase of people going out in their communities and doing different things in their local community. And a big one that I was really impressed with was the impact from the project was the increase in community connections. Those of you who went through the whole HCBS process a couple years ago, remember that? Maybe it was a few years ago. One of the tools that we employed during that process was the relationship map. Many of you remember that, the circles, kind of looks like a target. And we did a bunch of those as we were going through our HCBS remediation. And we came up with the idea of, after running the app for quite a while, let's do another round of those and see what the results are now that people have been using this app. And I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of our participants using the app indicated an increase in connections in their community. So I thought that was really great. All right, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to ask a few follow-up questions just to get at some important parts of the project, but I think you all did an amazing job, and I'm interested in learning more about all of these. We'll start with Lisa, and back to the self-employment project. Can you talk about when people attended the classes on self-employment and they followed through and created their own business plan? What do you think contributed to that, to people using those classes and really moving to the next step of having a business plan?
I think one of the things that we learned early on as we started this project is that there are a lot of components that go along with, really figuring out how to develop that business, write the business plan, learn all the ins and outs of what need to be done. And for the people who were most successful that we worked with, they had a really strong, committed, and invested support team around them. Again, to be able to hit all those benchmarks and get to that launch phase, it takes a lot of work. And to having those people around to really kind of guide that process and keep the train on the tracks, so to speak, was really imperative for people to really meet that success.
Thank you. Roland, as part of the travel app and the work you were doing with individuals, when people started scheduling their own rides, what change did you see in people and the support staff who worked with them?
Yeah, overall, we saw a positive increase in self-esteem and self-image, happiness and empowerment, and a positive outlook towards their employment site. And we also observed a decrease in stress, anxiety, frustration, and depressive thought because of the impact that they had now of knowing that they were going to be getting picked up on time and dropped off at work on time. For support staff, Uber has a feature in it called Share My Ride. So when the participant or the client would get into the Uber, they could choose to share their ride with either home staff or a family member, so that they could actually track them in real time as they were taking their ride from home to their job site. So they could see them, see where the car was at all times. And I have some comments here from some of the participants. One client commented on how she only lived 8 minutes away from her job site, but with the NET system, it would take her over an hour sometimes to get home, because there might be 2 or 3 more other clients in the vehicle, so they would stop and drop them off or go different ways. And with the Uber app, she was the only one in the vehicle at the time, so she was able to get home, you know, at a regular amount of time. The other one was family members would be saying that this has been such a blessing for the client and our family, knowing that he has a safe, dependable ride and has taken a lot of stress and worry off the family. So part of what we did in our grant as well was we, again, partnered with a videographer and created a short video where we talked with the participants and the impact of the grant on their lives. And we also have a table in the Tech Expo that will have that video running, and it really shows kind of how powerful the grant was in their lives and how it impacted them. We even had one family member ask us who she could go to in Augusta to talk them into continuing it on a permanent basis, because she wanted to advocate for it to be an ongoing program.
Yes, it sounds like NET could benefit from possibly seeing your app in action and meeting Uber. That's a side comment, I apologize. Moving on, Stephanie, when you mentioned outreach and partnership with 5 community support programs, and we're curious about, you reached out to both the staff who work in those programs and the individuals who were served. What about your approach or the information you shared really helped with helping people move to a pathway to work? What were the most successful approaches or the type of information that best helped people?
Sure. I think there are really 3 things that were most helpful. One, if you understand our traditional benefits counseling services model, we serve those first who are closest to paid employment. So we would see someone who's working or has a job offer, and we would see individuals who are considering employment as soon as those other individuals had been served. So with this pilot, we actually were able to provide benefits counseling services to people who were considering employment that would not necessarily have been served as quickly under our traditional model. Second, our staff had more time to work with individuals than we would under our normal model. So we were able to engage people, both consumers and providers, to give them a deeper understanding of how work impacts benefits, and not kind of digging into those fears and concerns about why someone is afraid to go to work. So getting deeper into the root cause. And then we had additional time to reach individuals if they had a barrier to obtaining the service. Sometimes a person doesn't fill out the paperwork, or we try to call them to schedule and they don't get back to us. Our staff had more time to get in touch with people, to follow through with the referral, and to also resolve the benefits issues. And that piece about getting to the root cause, or the fears and concerns about why someone is afraid to go to work, we found that we were covering more of the basics around work as possible, the philosophical, and less about the nitty-gritty work incentives. This is what will happen to your check exactly. Like, people really needed that basic level of understanding, and we are so excited that this pilot gave us the opportunity, because this is an audience that we think is critical to reach, that even if you don't have an immediate job offer, you have to be giving that message to everyone that work is possible. And so Lastly, we got a lot of valuable information from the providers about barriers to employment and benefits counseling. And probably the biggest takeaway was the recognition that the message of work being possible needs to be disseminated at a younger age, earlier in the system, and the opportunity that Lifespan presents to be able to do that. Because whether you're a benefits counselor, whether you're a support agency, case manager, if many folks express difficulty and challenges of feeling like you're the only cheerleader promoting employment, when you're up against families that might not necessarily think it's possible, maybe discouraging employment. And so we got a lot of really valuable feedback from providers as well.
Kristen, so when Skills was helping people around accessing the adaptive driver's ed and the simulator, how were people who got their driver's license how are they using it now to be more independent in their lives? And what steps are you planning to take to continue access to the driver's ed for people with disabilities?
Sure. I misspoke earlier because I forgot that last week we had our 5th person get their driver's license. One more has their testing date ready to go, so we anticipate we'll have 6 very soon. But what we found with those 5 is 2 of them then had the confidence to go out and actually look for a job. It hadn't necessarily been part of really kind of on their radar yet, but then they felt confidence in being able to get their driver's license to go out and to get a job. Another individual loves trains and had been volunteering and now has been accepted as an intern at a place that actually develops trains. And so they're able to do an internship now as well. People are also helping out their families. One woman who received her driver's license, her mom has been ill, and we ran into her in the grocery store, and she was there grocery shopping all by herself for the first time, with her license for the first time, being able to help her family and do the grocery shopping for her family, and doing some of those errands for her mom so that her mom could continue with her recovery. So I would say really just employment and community, everything that you would expect. You know, what do we use our driver's licenses for? That's what we're seeing in those results. Post-grant, we have had to change the format just a little bit in that, unfortunately, we have conflicting regulations. Department of Transportation requires that driver's education classes only be permitted at your licensed facility, and waiver services will, unfortunately, don't allow them to be completed at a provider-controlled facility. So what we have done is we have modified it, and we're now doing one-on-one driver's ed tutoring for individuals. So rather than the small group, we're doing one-on-one tutoring and still continued driving support for individuals. And we, since then, have become so busy, we've added a second vehicle. So now we've got lots of people on the road all the time. So.
And Brett, wanted to ask you, as you were developing the app and researching all the activities and goings-on in the community that you wanted to put on the app, what, if anything, what surprised you about what you found out about the variety of activities that were out in the community and available?
Well, I think one thing I really underestimated is the amount of opportunities for folks to be connected to their communities. You know, if you work in this field, you've probably heard it 1,000 times. There's a difference between being in the community and being part of the community, you know, and I think we've probably all fallen into that trap at times. There's just so many opportunities to connect the people we support with people, community members that have similar interests, similar hobbies. You know, we have a small group every week. They go down. There's a place in downtown Brunswick called the Social Goose. It's a little restaurant and bar, and they have a bingo night. Now, so rather than playing bingo in a center, our folks are going down at night, one evening a week, hanging out down at the local bar and restaurant, playing bingo with community members. And I think that's one of the keys to, and they do it every week, and I think that's one of the keys to being or making meaningful connections in the community is becoming a regular. And showing up. And I think we've reached a point where if our folks didn't show up, they would be missed. they're welcome there, and they're part of that little community in Brunswick. So I think that would be the thing that I noticed.
Thank you. For all of you, and we're going to change the slide to put the question up, but tell us one thing, and we'll start with you, Lisa, you learned through the Innovation Project that will help you to fuel change in the future, and how this will help you fuel change.
Well, sitting in a room full of 500 people who are here and because they're excited about innovation, I think for me, enthusiasm is what really spurs innovation. And we had a lot of fun with this project. It was a small one, but we were able to work with a lot of really amazing people who have creative business ideas, they have passion, they have determination to make it happen. And that really excited us and everybody else who was involved in this project. And that made us want to think more creatively and more innovatively on how to support them to realize that goal of self-employment.
Well, I think for us, with the Uber grant, it was similar to that, kind of tapping into that enthusiasm within our grant team, but also the enthusiasm and the desire by the participants to take a chance and turn over, their transportation for their employment to a different system and a different way of doing things. And luckily for us, it seemed to work out. But they were willing to kind of take that jump and try something new.
Hi. I think for us, for the Benefits Counseling Services Project, the exciting part is about the opportunity to grow capacity for a really important and much needed service. If the lifespan is enacted as it's currently proposed, Benefits Counseling Services would become a service under the lifespan, which we've not had that opportunity before, so it would be a great way to expand the service capacity. The other opportunity for innovation that we saw on this pilot is there's also in the lifespan waiver a proposal to have what's called an earned income disregard. 100% of wages would be excluded for the purposes of Maine Care eligibility. And I don't think until this pilot got underway that we fully really understood what a huge change that would make for our state. There are wonderful work incentives. If you're an SSI recipient or an SSDI recipient, we have a really generous working disabled Maine Care program. But if you're an individual that has a high Social Security disability benefit, you're excluded from that program. And so either with the earned income disregard or some enhancements to Maine's working disabled program, there's an opportunity for people on a waiver specifically that we saw that were disproportionately impacted, that if there were enhancements either made through the lifespan waiver or the working disabled program, we would really be able to say for most individuals with disabilities that they could go to work at some level and not lose their Maine Care. But at the current rate that things are at, there are some individuals that we were serving on this project that we were having to tell them, you can work, but you can earn up to $200 or $300 a month before your Maine Care was impacted. But they could earn, close to $1,600 a month and still keep their Social Security check. So I'm excited about the potential for right-sizing our Maine Care policy to be more in line with our Social Security policies.
Thank you. We have a couple of down in the expo, you'll see all of the kind of lessons learned that we have on both of our projects if you want to check those out. But the one major takeaway for us, and I think it was because we had two broad projects that ended up kind of really intersecting at times, was just around how connected everything is. No service is a singular service. Every service really has a thread that weaves in between all of them to bring it all together to help support a life well lived. And so that was our major key takeaway, that, employment is not just a service. Transportation is not just a service. Everything is connected, and it's critical to look at it from that viewpoint rather than as each singular service.
I think I'll tell a quick story. It's not related to our project, but it illustrates or helps illustrate the lesson that I've learned. How many of you remember Blockbuster? Now, for the youngsters in the room, there used to be this chain of video stores called Blockbuster. Things were different back. I can't believe I'm talking about the old days of Blockbuster. Anyway. Back in the day, if you wanted to watch movies at home, what did you do? You went to the video store and you rented a VHS video and you brought it home. And you might go on a Friday night after work, go to Blockbuster, pick out a few videos, pay for your videos. You'd have them for, 3 days, 5 days, whatever it was. You had that amount of time to watch them, and then you had to return them, or you'd have to pay the late fee. You remember the little stickers, "Be kind, rewind," and all that. And for those of you who never went to a Blockbuster, it was kind of like a video library. You'd walk in, there'd be shelves with different sections. There'd be the new releases and the action and adventure and the comedy, the romance, the kids section, kind of like a library. Well, in 1997, two gentlemen, I forgot their names, I've got it written down somewhere. These two gentlemen kind of saw the writing on the wall. They said, "We think the way people watch movies at home is going to change." So they came up with this idea that at the time was pretty innovative. They said, rather than going to the video store and waiting in line to rent your video, we're going to provide this service. We're going to mail DVDs to you. You go on our website, pick which movies you want, we'll mail them to you, you watch them, and then you can pop them in the mail and send them back. So they started this. It kind of caught on and started getting some momentum. And 3 years later, in the year 2000, they'd grown a bit. They weren't really all that profitable yet, but they still really believed in their approach and that they felt like things were going to be changing. So these guys approached Blockbuster and said, "Hey, do you want to buy our business?" Well, the business was Netflix, by the way. All right. Blockbuster laughed them out of the room. Said, "Are you kidding me? You guys are hardly making any money, and we've got 9,000 stores to back our proven method of the way people want to watch movies at home. Why would we want to change? Why would we want to do anything different? You guys can just, there's the door, and we're just going to keep doing things the way we've always done them." Well, what happened? Where's Blockbuster now? I think there's one store in Oregon that still bears the name Blockbuster. Those 9,000 stores are no longer. And Netflix is now worth $150 billion. They offered it up for $50 million. That'd be like if I'd given Kristen here $50 back in 2000. It'd now be worth $150,000. I mean, that's what we're looking at here. So the lesson I learned from this project is, I'll confess, there are times when the idea of change or stepping outside my comfort zone can induce some anxiety, especially when you've been used to doing things a certain way for a very long time. But I think the lesson for me was change is good. There's a saying I heard somebody make, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it was something along the lines of, people don't resist change because it hurts. Change hurts because people resist it. And change is coming, and we have a choice. We can be part of it and mold it, or we can be the next Blockbuster. All right, thank you.
Well, we didn't script that. We did not. But wow, what a way to end and go to lunch. Is that what's next? Because I'm hungry.